The silence was what broke them, not the rejection itself, not the public humiliation or the shattered bond that sent hairline fractures through Alara Hayes' soul like ice cracking under pressure. It was the moment after Alpha Theron Greyheart spoke the words, when 300 wolves held their collective breath, waiting for her to scream. She didn't. The grand hall of the Ironwood Pack House smelled of cedar beams and melted wax from 1,000 candles. It was Mating Moon, the night when the goddess herself was supposed to bless unions, and the chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the polished floor like ghosts waltzing to music only they could hear. Alara stood in the center of it all, wearing a dress the color of ash. It had been her mother's once, back when her mother was still alive, back when the Hayes name still meant something. The fabric was soft from age and fraying slightly at the hem, but Alara had mended it with careful stitches because she couldn't afford anything else. She was 21 years old, an orphan, the daughter of a fallen Gamma who died under mysterious circumstances when she was 9. She had scrubbed the floors of this very hall more times than she could count. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, the mate bond had snapped into place the moment Theron entered the room. She'd felt it like a fishhook catching beneath her ribs, pulling her toward him with an inevitability that made her knees weak. Her wolf, a small silver creature who rarely spoke, had lifted her head for the first time in years and whispered one word, "Mine." Except Theron didn't look at her like she was his. He stood on the raised dais at the front of the hall, his shoulders filling out a tailored black suit that probably cost more than Alara would earn in 6 months. His dark blonde hair was swept back from a face that belonged on old marble statues, all sharp angles and aristocratic bones. He was handsome in the way alphas were supposed to be handsome, commanding, untouchable. And beside him stood Isolde Sylvain. Isolde wore red silk that clung to curves Alara would never have, her black hair cascading down her back in perfect waves. She was the daughter of Beta Corwin Sylvain, which meant she came with a dowry, political connections, and a bloodline the council approved of. Her hand rested possessively on Theron's arm, her crimson nails like drops of blood against his sleeve. Theron's jaw was tight. For just a moment, when his gray-green eyes found Alara's across the crowded room, something flickered in them. Pain, maybe, or regret. But then Elder Corvus stepped forward from the shadows. The old wolf moved like a specter, his robes the color of ash and bone. His face was all hollows and sharp edges, skin stretched too tight over his skull. When he smiled, it was the smile of a crow surveying a fresh corpse. He leaned close to Theron and whispered something Alara couldn't hear, but she saw the way Theron's hands curled into fists, saw the muscle jump in his jaw, saw him close his eyes for the space of a single breath, as if gathering himself for battle. When he opened them again, they were empty. Theron raised one hand, and the murmuring crowd fell instantly silent. His voice, when he spoke, was the voice of an alpha. It carried to every corner of the hall, resonating in the chest like the low note of a cello. "My family, tonight is a night of celebration." Alara's heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of her ribs. "As your alpha, my duty is to the strength of this pack." He paused. His gaze slid over Alara as if she were furniture. "Weakness is a luxury we cannot afford. The moon goddess sometimes tests us with matches that do not suit our station." The air left the room. Every head turned toward Alara. She felt their stares like physical touches, pressing against her skin, trying to push her down, down, down into the floorboards she'd scrubbed on her hands and knees. Alara Hayes. Her name in his mouth sounded like an accusation. "I, Theron Greyheart, Alpha of the Ironwood Pack, reject you as my mate." The bond shattered. It felt like dying, like someone had reached into her chest, wrapped both hands around her heart, and squeezed until something vital ruptured. Her wolf howled, a sound of such pure anguish that Alara's knees buckled. She caught herself on instinct, locking her joints, refusing to fall. The pain was a living thing. It crawled up her throat and tried to force a scream from her lips. She swallowed it. Theron continued, his voice flat and emotionless. I choose Isolde Sylvain as my Luna. She brings wealth, status, and the strength our pack requires for the future. Isolde beamed, triumph glittering in her dark eyes. She raised Theron's hand as if he'd just won a prize at the fair, and the pack began to applaud. Uncertain at first, then louder, filling the hall with noise that felt like mockery. They were waiting for Alara to break, to beg, to throw herself at Theron's feet and plead for him to reconsider. That's what rejected wolves did, wasn't it? They shattered like glass. They became cautionary tales whispered in the dark. Alara looked at Theron, really looked at him, at the way his hands were trembling slightly despite the rigid set of his shoulders, at the sheen in his eyes that might have been unshed tears, at the white-knuckled grip he had on Isolde's fingers, as if holding on to a lifeline. He wasn't a savior, she realized with sudden crystalline clarity. He was just a man, a weak man who'd chosen the easy path because someone else told him to walk it. And she deserved better. Alara straightened her spine. She smoothed the worn fabric of her mother's dress with hands that did not shake. She lifted her chin, exposing the curve of her throat, not in submission, in defiance. When she spoke, her voice wasn't loud, but in the shocked silence of the hall, it carried like a bell. I, Alara Hayes, accept your rejection, Theron Greyheart. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of confusion through the crowd. She saw Theron blink, saw his brow furrow. He hadn't expected her to speak, hadn't expected her to claim any agency in her own destruction. Alara held his gaze. She let him see that she wasn't crying, that she wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of her pain. May you find the happiness you think you deserve. It was a curse wrapped in politeness, a dagger coated in honey. Then she turned her back on him, on the pack, on the only life she'd ever known. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. Wolves stepped back, not quite meeting her eyes. Some looked ashamed. Others looked relieved that it wasn't them standing in her shoes. A few of the older females watched her with something that might have been respect. Alara walked toward the massive oak doors at the entrance. Each step felt like lifting a mountain. Her wolf was curled into a ball in the corner of her mind, whimpering, bleeding from a wound that might never fully heal. But Alara didn't run. She walked, steady, dignified. Alara. Theron's voice cracked like a whip. She heard desperation in it now, underneath the alpha command. Heard the realization that he'd just made a terrible mistake. She paused at the threshold, didn't turn around. Where do you think you're going? Ilara's hand rested on the heavy iron handle. Rain was falling outside. She could hear it drumming against the roof, smell it on the wind that slipped through the cracks around the door. I am no longer a member of the Ironwood Pack, Alpha. Her voice was calm, empty. I am Rogue, and I am leaving. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit her like a baptism, cold and clean and merciless. It soaked through her dress in seconds, plastered her brown hair to her skull, but Alara didn't care. She welcomed it. The physical discomfort gave her something to focus on besides the screaming void where her heart used to be. Behind her, the doors swung shut with a sound like a coffin closing. She didn't look back, not once. The memory always started the same way. Ilara was 8 years old, small for her age, with skinny arms and knobby knees and eyes too big for her face. She sat on a flat boulder at the edge of Whispering Ridge, her legs dangling over the drop, watching the sun set over the valley below. Her father sat beside her. Gamma Thomas Hayes was a big man, broad in the shoulders and gentle in the eyes, with gray threading through his brown hair and laugh lines carved deep around his mouth. He smelled like pine sap and old books, and when he smiled at Ilara, she felt like the most important person in the world. "Look up, little star," he said softly. Ilara tilted her head back. The sky was deepening from blue to indigo, and the first stars were beginning to appear. But it was the moon that caught her attention. It hung low and huge over the eastern mountains, and it wasn't the usual silver-white. Tonight, it glowed with a faint violet tinge, like someone had dipped it in twilight. "It's pretty," Ilara whispered. "It's more than pretty." Her father's voice held a reverence that made her shiver. "That's a celestial moon. Happens maybe once in 100 years, when the veil between our world and the goddess's realm grows thin." He reached out and took her small hand in his large, calloused one. "Our bloodline is special, Ilara. Your grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, before the packs grew so rigid and afraid. She said we came from celestial wolves, blessed by the moon herself. We're supposed to be bridges between the mortal and the divine." Ilara stared at the strange violet moon. For just a moment, her vision went strange. Colors bled together, and she could see threads of silver light connecting everything. The trees, the stars, her father, herself, all of it woven together in a pattern too complex to understand. Her eyes flashed violet just for a heartbeat. Thomas sucked in a sharp breath. His grip on her hand tightened. "Never forget who you are," he whispered urgently. "No matter what anyone tells you, no matter how they try to make you small, you carry something precious, Ilara. Something they've tried to erase from history because they fear it." "Who's they?" Ilara asked, but her father just shook his head. He pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her skinny shoulders. "Promise me you'll survive, little star. Whatever happens. Promise me you'll find a way to shine." She promised. 1 week later, Gamma Thomas Hayes fell from Whispering Ridge. His body was found at the bottom of the ravine, broken on the rocks. The pack called it an accident, a tragic misstep on a path he'd walked 1,000 times. But Ilara, 9 years old and newly orphaned, stood at his funeral and watched Elder Corvus watching her. The old wolf's eyes were flat and cold and satisfied. She knew. She couldn't prove it. Had no evidence. But in the way that children sometimes know things that adults have forgotten how to see, Ilara understood that her father hadn't fallen. He'd been pushed, because of what he'd told her, because of what she was, and so she learned the first hard lesson of survival: silence. Rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ilara's apartment, turning downtown Seattle into an impressionist painting of gray and silver and blurred neon. She stood at the glass with a cup of coffee in her hands, watching the city wake up below her. 26 years old. 5 years since she'd walked out of the Ironwood pack house and never looked back. She'd built a life, a good one. The apartment wasn't large, just a studio in the heart of the city. But it was hers. Clean lines, minimal furniture, everything in shades of cream and soft gray. She designed it herself, maximizing the natural light, making the small space feel open and breathable. Architecture had saved her. In those first terrible months after the rejection, when the bond sickness had her curled on the floor of a cheap motel room, Sweating and shaking and wishing for death, she'd found a book, an old textbook on structural engineering left behind by a previous guest. She'd read it cover to cover, desperate for anything to distract her from the pain, and something had clicked. Buildings made sense. They followed rules. If you understood the principles of load-bearing and tension and compression, you could create something that would stand for centuries. There was no emotion in mathematics, no betrayal in physics. So she'd taught herself, worked 3 jobs to pay for online classes, apprenticed with a firm that didn't care that she was a rogue wolf as long as she could draft clean blueprints, clawed her way up from nothing. Now she was a senior architect at Sterling and Finch, one of the most prestigious firms in the Pacific Northwest. She designed buildings that changed skylines. Her work had been featured in magazines. She'd made herself matter. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Elara glanced at it, saw her boss's name, and felt her stomach tighten. Dave Henderson, human, chronically anxious, good at his job when he wasn't having a panic attack. She picked up. "It's 6:30 in the morning, Dave." I know, I'm sorry." His voice was frantic. "But we have a situation. Remember that project I mentioned? The private estate in the Cascades? The one you were being mysterious about?" "Yeah, well, the client moved up the timeline. He wants to meet today. This morning. In 45 minutes. Elara closed her eyes. She'd been planning to spend the morning working on the Westlake renovation drawings. "Who is he?" "Cale Ashenmore." The name meant nothing to her. "Should I know him?" He's, Dave lowered his voice, even though he was probably alone. "He's supernatural, like you. High level, very high level. Private equity, real estate, rumors of government contracts. Nobody really knows the full scope of his holdings, just that he has more money than God and a temper to match. A wolf, then. Probably an alpha." Elara had gotten good at avoiding pack politics, at keeping her head down and her rogue status quiet. Most humans couldn't tell the difference anyway, and the wolves in Seattle's business district had learned to leave her alone. But meeting with a high-ranking wolf was always a risk. "What does he want?" she asked. "A fortress disguised as a home." His words. He sent over some preliminary requirements. Reinforced concrete, ballistic glass, underground bunkers. The budget is basically unlimited. Despite herself, Elara felt a flicker of interest. This was the kind of project architects dreamed about, complete creative freedom. Resources to do it right, and she needed the distraction. "Fine," she said. "I'll be there in 30. She hung up and drained her coffee, then moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Shower, clothes, makeup, hair. The woman who looked back at her from the bathroom mirror bore little resemblance to the girl in the ash-colored dress. Elara had cut her hair into a sleek bob that framed her face, highlighting the sharp line of her jaw. Her clothes were tailored, a navy suit that fit her like armor. She looked successful, competent, untouchable. It was a performance, but she'd been performing for 5 years. She was good at it. Sterling and Finch occupied the 40th floor of the Columbia Tower, with views that stretched from the Puget Sound to the Cascade Mountains on clear days. Today wasn't a clear day. The rain had settled into a steady drizzle that turned everything soft and gray. Elara badged through security at 7:45 and took the elevator up, reviewing the client notes on her tablet. Cale Ashenmore, no age listed, no photo. The project brief was sparse but specific. Secluded location, defensible position, must accommodate a large household while maintaining privacy. It read like something a paranoid billionaire would commission, or a mob boss, or an alpha with enemies. She stepped off the elevator and immediately spotted Dave pacing in the lobby. He looked like he hadn't slept. his tie already loosened, his hair standing up in tufts where he'd been running his hands through it. "Oh, thank God!" He grabbed her elbow. "He's early. He's been here for 20 minutes. He doesn't like waiting, Alara. I can feel him judging the coffee." "Breathe, Dave." "I'm breathing. This is me breathing." He demonstrated with several loud theatrical inhales. "He's in conference room B. I'll introduce you, then I'm leaving. This is your project. You're the genius. Just, be your brilliant self and try not to mention that he's terrifying." "Is he terrifying?" "I don't know. He has this energy, like standing next to a lightning strike waiting to happen." Alara smoothed her blazer and picked up her project folder. "I've got this." She walked down the hall to conference room B, her heels clicking on the polished marble. Through the glass walls, she could see a figure standing by the window, silhouetted against the gray Seattle morning. Tall. Very tall. Broad through the shoulders in a way that suggested either a gym obsession or supernatural genetics, probably both. Alara pushed open the door. The scent hit her first. Cedar and ozone, and something wild, something ancient, like a forest after a lightning strike. It bypassed her conscious mind and went straight to her hindbrain, to the wolf she'd kept carefully leashed for 5 years. Her wolf lifted her head. For the first time since the rejection, she didn't just stir. She woke, fully, urgently. The man at the window turned around. Alara's breath caught. He was massive, 6.5 feet at least, with shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit in a way that made the expensive fabric look almost casual. His face was all hard angles and brutal beauty. The kind of face that belonged on ancient coins, high cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Storm gray, shot through with veins of silver. Old eyes. Eyes that had seen too much and lost the ability to look away. When their gazes met, something electric arced between them. The air seemed to thicken, to pulse with a rhythm that matched her suddenly racing heartbeat. His nostrils flared. He inhaled deeply, scenting her, and Alara watched his pupils blow wide. After 333 years of existence, Cale Ashenmore had thought he was beyond surprise. He was wrong. The woman who walked into the conference room was not what he'd expected. Dave Henderson had described his senior architect as brilliant and professional, but he'd failed to mention that she was beautiful in a way that made Cale's wolf, a creature who'd been silent and sullen for decades, suddenly sit up and take notice. She was petite, maybe 5'4", with a heart-shaped face and warm brown hair cut in a sleek bob. Her suit was perfectly tailored, her makeup understated, her entire presentation designed to project competence and control. But it was her eyes that caught him. Large and dark, framed by thick lashes, they held a wariness that he recognized. The kind of wariness that came from being hurt badly and learning not to trust easily. She was a wolf. He could tell that immediately, even though she'd layered herself in scent blockers and suppressants that would have fooled most supernaturals. But Cale was an alpha king. His senses were sharper than sharp. And beneath the vanilla perfume and the carefully constructed human facade, he could smell her. Rain and honey and something clean and bright, like moonlight on snow. His wolf surged forward so violently that Cale actually took a step back. "Mate," the beast howled. "Ours. Claim." No. The word was a desperate mental shout. Cale slammed down on the connection between himself and his wolf, forcing the creature back into the cage he'd built in his mind over centuries of practice. Not again. He couldn't do this again. Couldn't watch another woman die screaming his name while he stood helpless, watching the curse destroy everything he touched. 47. 47 women he'd claimed. 47 bonds he'd forged, 47 deaths he'd witnessed, each one a fresh crack in his sanity. He wouldn't make her 48. Mr. Ashenmore? Her voice was calm, professional. She extended her hand. I'm Alara Hayes. I'll be leading the design on your project. Kyle looked at her hand. Small, elegant fingers, no rings, no pack marks on her wrist. A rogue. That explained the scent blockers. The careful neutrality. She was surviving in a human world by pretending to be something she wasn't. He knew that game. He'd played it himself for longer than she'd been alive. Slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, Cale reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, electricity snapped between them. Visible, audible. A sharp crack of static that made them both flinch, but neither pulled away. Her hand was warm in his, soft. He could feel her pulse against his palm, quick and fluttering like a trapped bird. Sorry, Alara said, her voice slightly breathless. The carpet is prone to static. Cale said nothing. He was too busy trying to control his wolf, who was throwing himself against the mental bars, howling and snarling and demanding that Kyle do something, claim her, protect her, make her theirs. 3 centuries of perfect control, of iron discipline, and one touch from this woman threatened to shatter it all. He forced himself to release her hand, forced his face into a neutral mask. Please, he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. Sit. She sat, opened her folder, pulled out a tablet and stylus, all business. Mr. Henderson mentioned you're looking for a private estate, secluded, defensible. Her eyes flicked up to meet his. I should be up front. I don't typically work on residential projects. My specialty is commercial architecture, high-rises, office complexes, mixed-use developments. I'm aware. Cale moved to the chair across from her, but didn't sit. He didn't trust himself to be that close without doing something stupid. I've reviewed your portfolio, the Rainier Tower renovation, the Seattle Art Museum expansion. Your work is exceptional. A faint flush colored her cheeks. Thank you. I need someone who understands structural integrity under extreme conditions. Someone who can design a building that looks like a home, but functions like a fortress. He paused. I also need someone who understands the unique requirements of supernatural clients. Her pen stilled on the tablet. She looked up at him slowly, and Cale saw the exact moment she understood what he was really saying. You're a wolf. I know you're a wolf. This conversation is happening on 2 levels, and we both know it. I see. Her voice was carefully neutral. And what exactly makes your requirements unique, Mr. Ashenmore? I have a large family. We value our privacy. We need space to run. Run, she repeated. Yes. They stared at each other. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Finally, Alara nodded. I can work with that. How large is your family? Including extended members, about 200. Her eyebrows rose. That's not a house. That's a compound. I prefer to think of it as a sanctuary. She made a note on her tablet. And the defensive requirements? Are you expecting specific threats? Always, Kyle said simply. I've made enemies over the years. I need to know that when I'm home, the people I care about are safe. It wasn't a lie. He did have enemies. You didn't live for 3 centuries and accumulate the kind of power he had without making people who wanted to see you fall. But the real threat wasn't outside his walls. It was the curse that lived in his blood, waiting to destroy anyone foolish enough to love him. Alara studied him for a long moment. He could see her mind working, cataloging details, making assessments. She was smart. He could see that in the sharpness of her gaze, the way she tilted her head slightly when she was thinking. This will be a complex project. she said finally. At minimum, I'll need geological surveys, environmental impact studies, and probably some creative solutions for utilities if you're building in a truly remote location. Money isn't an object. It never is with clients like you. There was a faint edge to her voice, not quite bitterness, but close. The question is whether you're serious. I don't design vanity projects, Mr. Ashenmore. If this is just a rich man's fantasy that's going to sit in a drawer while you change your mind, I'm not interested. Kyle felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth, the first genuine smile in longer than he could remember. You don't fear me. Should I? Most people do. I'm not most people. No, Cale thought. You're not. She was extraordinary. Poised and professional on the surface, but underneath he could sense steel. This was a woman who'd been broken and put herself back together, who'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. He wanted to know her story, wanted to know what had put that wariness in her eyes and that careful control in every movement. But more than that, his wolf wanted to know why she had no pack scent, why she was alone, why she flinched just slightly when he'd said the word family. I'm hosting an event tonight, Kyle heard himself say. A gala. Networking for the supernatural community in the tri-state area. A peace summit of sorts. Ilara's pen had gone very still. I need an architect who understands both worlds, he continued, the human and the supernatural. But I also need to see how you handle yourself in my world, among wolves. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a black envelope edged in silver, set it on the table between them. 8 p.m. Grand Fairmont Hotel. Formal attire. Ilara stared at the invitation like it might bite her. Is this a professional requirement or a personal invitation? Both. And if I refuse? Cale met her eyes, held her gaze, let her see that he was serious. Then I take my business elsewhere. I don't hire cowards, Ms. Hayes. It was a calculated risk, a test. Would she back down, or would she rise to the challenge? For a long moment, Ilara didn't move. Then slowly, she reached out and picked up the envelope. I'll be there. Cale felt his wolf settle, satisfied. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle, looked back at her. And Ms. Hayes? Yes? Don't wear the scent blocker tonight. It gives me a headache. He left before she could respond, but not before he saw the flash of shock in her eyes. She'd thought he couldn't tell, thought her disguise was perfect. But Cale had been hunting for 3 centuries. He knew prey when he saw it. And he knew when prey was about to become something far more dangerous. Ilara stood in front of her closet and tried to remember the last time she'd worn a formal gown. The rejection night, 5 years ago. The ash-colored dress that had belonged to her mother. She'd burned it the morning after she left the pack. Watched it turn to smoke and char in a rusty barrel behind the motel where she'd collapsed from bond sickness. The smell of burning fabric had mixed with the scent of her own vomit, and she'd thought at the time that this was what the end of the world smelled like, but she hadn't ended. She'd survived, and now she owned exactly 3 dresses, all of them purchased for work events where she needed to look successful but not approachable. Black, knee-length, safe. None of them would work for tonight. Ilara checked her phone. 3 p.m. The gala started at 8. She had 5 hours to find something appropriate, get ready, and somehow convince herself that walking into a room full of wolves was a good idea. Her wolf stirred in the back of her mind. For the first time in years, the creature wasn't silent. She was restless, pacing. Ever since the meeting with Kyle Ashenmore, something had shifted. Don't, Ilara told her firmly. Don't get attached. Don't hope. But even as she thought it, she could still feel the ghost of his hand in hers. The electricity. The way his silver-veined gaze had darkened when he looked at her, like she was something precious he'd lost and found again. She shook her head. This was business. He was a client. A very powerful, very dangerous client who happened to be a wolf, but that didn't change the fundamental nature of their relationship. Professional, detached, safe. Elara grabbed her keys and headed out into the Seattle drizzle. 3 hours later, she stood in her bathroom wrapped in a towel, staring at the dress hanging on the back of the door. The boutique owner had taken one look at her and known exactly what she needed. Midnight blue silk that caught the light like water under a full moon. Strapless, fitted through the bodice before flowing down to the floor in a cascade of fabric that moved like liquid. Simple, elegant, devastating. When Elara had tried it on, the woman had actually gasped. "That's the one," she'd said. "You look like a queen." Elara didn't feel like a queen. She felt like a girl playing dress-up in someone else's life. But she put the dress on anyway, let the silk slide over her skin like a cool touch, stepped into heels that added 3 inches to her height and made her legs look longer than they were. Applied makeup with a careful hand, highlighting her eyes, her cheekbones, leaving her lips bare except for a hint of gloss. Her hair had dried in soft waves. She pinned one side back with a simple silver clip her grandmother had given her, back when her grandmother was still alive, back when her family was still whole. When she finally looked at herself in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. 5 years ago, she'd been invisible. The orphan girl in the borrowed dress, the one everyone looked through instead of at. Now she looked like someone worth seeing. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "A car will pick you up at 7:30. Don't be late. No signature." But Elara knew who it was from. She could almost hear Kyle's rough voice saying the words, that hint of command that suggested he was used to being obeyed. She texted back, "I can drive myself." The response was immediate. "Parking will be impossible. Easier this way." And then, after a pause, "You look beautiful." Elara's breath caught. She looked around her empty apartment, at the windows that didn't face the street, at the curtains she always kept closed. How did he know what she looked like? Unless he'd sent someone to watch. Unless he had people reporting back. Unless this powerful alpha king who'd walked into her life this morning had already decided she was worth monitoring. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, her traitorous heart beat faster. The car was a black Mercedes with windows tinted so dark that Elara couldn't see who was driving. It pulled up to her building precisely at 7:30, and a man in a dark suit opened the back door for her. He was a wolf. She could tell by the way he moved, by the deference in his posture when he offered his hand to help her in. He didn't meet her eyes, didn't speak. The inside of the car smelled like leather and something wilder. Cedar and ozone. Kale's scent lingering like a ghost. They drove through downtown Seattle in silence. Elara watched the city slide past the windows, rain streaking the glass, neon signs bleeding color into the wet streets. She'd lived here for 5 years, had walked these sidewalks thousands of times, but tonight everything looked different, sharper, more vivid, like she was seeing it through new eyes. Her wolf pressed close to the surface, making her skin feel too tight. Easy, Elara thought. We're just going to a party. We're going to be professional. We're going to survive. The Mercedes pulled up to the Grand Fairmont Hotel, a historic building in the heart of downtown with architecture that belonged in a different century. Gilded columns, marble steps, doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But it was the scent that hit her when she stepped out of the car. Wolves. Hundreds of them. The musky, wild smell of predators barely contained by expensive suits and designer gowns. It rolled over her like a wave, triggering every instinct that told her to run, to hide, to make herself small and invisible. Instead, Ilara lifted her chin and walked through the entrance. The grand ballroom was on the second floor, accessed by a sweeping marble staircase that belonged in a palace. Ilara paused at the top, one hand on the railing, looking down at the sea of bodies below. 500 wolves, easy, maybe more. They filled the ballroom from wall to wall, dressed in their finest, drinking champagne from crystal flutes, pretending to be civilized. Chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling like frozen stars. An orchestra played something classical and haunting in one corner. The floor was polished to a mirror shine, and every single person in that room could tear out her throat without breaking a sweat. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to take the first step down, then the second, then the third. Heads began to turn. It started as a ripple near the base of the stairs and spread outward like a stone dropped in still water. Conversations faltered. Wolves looked up. Eyes widened. They could smell it on her. The lack of pack scent. The carefully applied suppressants that couldn't quite hide what she was. Rogue. Ilara heard the whispers start before she was halfway down the stairs. They hissed through the crowd like wind through autumn leaves. Is that her? The Hayes girl? I heard she died. No, I heard she went feral. Look at her. She looks like a queen. That last one, whispered by an older female wolf with kind eyes, made Ilara's step falter for just a moment, but she recovered, kept walking. Let the silk of her dress flow behind her like water. She reached the bottom of the stairs and the crowd parted, creating a path through the ballroom. Not welcoming, just uncertain. They didn't know what to do with her. A rogue didn't belong at an alpha's gala, but a rogue who looked like that, who moved with that kind of confidence, who had obviously been invited by someone powerful. They didn't know the rules anymore. Ilara was 3 steps into the crowd when she saw him. Theron Greyheart stood near the bar, a glass of champagne frozen halfway to his lips. He looked older than she remembered, still handsome, still commanding in his tailored tuxedo, but there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Gray threaded through his dark blonde hair at the temples. His shoulders looked heavy, like he carried weight he couldn't put down. Beside him, Isolde Silvane wore red again. Always red, like she was trying to brand herself into everyone's memory. The dress was cut low enough to make several older wolves frown with disapproval, and her dark hair was piled on her head in an elaborate style that probably took hours. She saw Ilara first. Her champagne glass shattered. The crystal exploded against the marble floor, sending shards and golden liquid everywhere. Several nearby wolves jumped back. "Theron!" Isolde hissed. Her hand shot out and grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks. "Theron, look." He looked, and Ilara watched the color drain from his face. For a long moment, they just stared at each other across the crowded room. The orchestra kept playing. The wolves kept pretending to have conversations, but Ilara could feel the weight of 500 pairs of eyes watching them, waiting to see what would happen. Theron handed his champagne to someone nearby without looking, started walking toward her. His steps were measured, controlled, but Ilara could see the tremor in his hands. Isolde grabbed at him, tried to pull him back, but he shook her off. He stopped 3 feet away from Ilara, close enough that she could smell him. Rain and wet timber and something sour underneath that might have been desperation. Once, that scent had made her wolf purr, made her think of home and safety and belonging. Now it just smelled like rotting wood. Ilara. Her name came out hoarse, like he'd been practicing how to say it and still couldn't get it right. What are you doing here? Working, Ilara said. Her voice was calm, empty of emotion. You? This is a summit for alphas and high-ranking pack members. Theron's eyes raked over her, taking in the dress, the heels, the way she held herself. Rogues don't attend these events. It's not safe. There are wolves here who would... He trailed off. Who would what? Ilara asked softly. Tear me apart? For being what you made me? Theron flinched. That's not... I didn't mean... Alpha Greyheart. The voice came from behind Ilara, cold and precise. She turned to see an elderly wolf approaching. He wore robes the color of ash and bone, and his face was all sharp angles and hollow cheeks. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Elder Corvus, the man who'd stood behind Theron 5 years ago, the man who'd whispered in his ear and turned him into a coward, the man who'd watched her father's funeral with satisfaction in his eyes. Elder. Theron's voice held forced respect. I was just greeting an old acquaintance. How unfortunate that your acquaintances include rogues. Corvus's gaze slid over Ilara like she was something distasteful he'd found on his shoe. One would think an alpha of your standing would have better taste. Ilara felt her wolf surge forward, teeth bared, but she held it back, barely. Elder Corvus, she said, inclining her head just enough to be polite without being submissive. It's been a long time. Not long enough, apparently. His eyes narrowed. Tell me, child, how did a rogue with no pack, no status, and no invitation manage to gain entry to an event of this caliber? I was invited. By whom? By me. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It seemed to resonate in the floor, in the walls, in the very air itself. Deep, commanding, the kind of voice that made wolves instinctively bow their heads. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and Cale Ashenmore walked through. He'd known the moment she entered the building. The bond that shouldn't exist, the pull he'd been fighting since the moment they shook hands, had flared to life like someone had set fire to his blood. His wolf had stopped pacing and started howling, throwing himself against Cale's control with renewed desperation. She's here. Ours. Go to her. Protect her. Claim her. Cale had been in the VIP lounge on the 3rd floor, suffering through a conversation with visiting alphas from the Southern Territories. Political nonsense about trade agreements and territory disputes. The kind of tedious diplomacy that made up most of his existence. But the moment Ilara walked into the ballroom, everything else ceased to matter. He'd excused himself mid-sentence and headed for the stairs. Now he walked through the crowd of wolves, watching them scatter before him like leaves before a storm. He towered over the crowd, their heads barely reaching his shoulders. He moved with the kind of predatory grace that came from being the apex predator in any room he entered for 3 centuries. His tuxedo was black on black, tailored to accommodate his frame, with a shirt open at the collar because he hated feeling constrained. No jewelry except for a ring on his right hand, old silver with symbols etched into it that predated modern language. But none of that was what made the wolves move. It was the power that radiated from him like heat from a fire. The unmistakable aura of an alpha king. He reached Ilara's side and finally allowed himself to look at her properly. The dress was devastating. Midnight blue silk that made her skin glow. The color brought out hints of violet in her brown eyes that he hadn't noticed before. Her shoulders were bare. the elegant line of her neck exposed, and Kale's wolf immediately fixated on the place where her neck met her shoulder, where the mating bite would go. If he were foolish enough to claim her, which he wasn't, no matter how much his entire being screamed that she was his. Alpha Ashenmore. Elder Corvus recovered first, though his voice held an edge. I was just explaining to this young woman that rogues are not typically welcome at events of this nature. And I was just explaining to the elder that I was invited. Ilara's voice was steady, but Kale could hear her heartbeat. Too fast. She was scared. Good. Fear meant she understood the danger, though something in him hated that she had to be afraid at all. Miss Hayes is my guest, Kale said. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. I invited her. Is there a problem, Corvus? The elder's jaw tightened. Of course not, Your Majesty. I simply thought it prudent to inquire. We've had issues with rogues in the past. Security concerns. I'll vouch for her security. Kale shifted slightly, placing himself between Corvus and Ilara. It was subtle, protective. Every wolf in the vicinity would understand the gesture. Is there anything else? No, of course not. But Corvus's eyes lingered on Ilara for a moment longer, calculating, assessing. Enjoy the evening. He melted back into the crowd, but Kyle caught the way he signaled to someone near the doors. Instructions being passed, someone to watch, to report back. Kale filed it away. Corvus had always been a political creature, more interested in power than pack. If he saw Ilara as a threat, that meant she was important somehow. The question was why. Kale turned his attention to Theron Greyheart. The young alpha looked like he'd been gut-punched, staring at Ilara with an expression that was equal parts longing and devastation. Alpha Greyheart, Kale said. His voice was pleasant, empty of inflection, the kind of tone that preceded violence. I was under the impression that your territory was in Oregon. It is. Theron dragged his gaze away from Ilara with visible effort. I came for the summit, to discuss the new territorial agreements. How unfortunate that you forgot your manners in Oregon. Kale took a single step forward, just one, but it was enough to make Theron take 2 steps back. Remove your hand from my guest. Theron looked down. His hand was still extended toward Ilara, fingers outstretched, as if he'd been about to touch her arm. He hadn't even realized he was doing it. He snatched his hand back like he'd been burned. Your Majesty, I didn't mean to. She and I have history. You were just leaving, Kale said. It wasn't a suggestion. Behind Theron, Isolde had gone pale. She grabbed her husband's arm, tugging urgently. Theron, don't, please. But Theron didn't move. He looked at Ilara instead, his eyes desperate. Can we talk? He asked her. Please, just 5 minutes. There are things I need to explain. Things I need you to understand about that night. I was weak, Ilara. I was so weak, and I've regretted it every single day since. And if I could just make you see... No. Ilara's voice was quiet, but final. She looked at Theron with an expression that Kale couldn't quite read. Not hate, not pity. Something sadder and more complicated. I don't need explanations, she said. And I don't need closure. What happened, happened. I survived it. I moved on. You should do the same. But we were mates, Theron said. His voice cracked. The bond. The bond is broken. You broke it. And I accepted it. Ilara turned away from him, dismissing him as thoroughly as if he'd ceased to exist. If you'll excuse me, I need a drink. She walked away, chin high, shoulders back, moving through the crowd like she owned the place. Kyle watched Theron's face crumble, watched the exact moment the younger alpha realized he'd lost something he could never get back. Good. The vindictive part of Cale, the part that still remembered being helpless while women he cared about died in his arms, took savage satisfaction in Theron's pain. Then Cale turned and followed Alara. He found her at the bar, ordering sparkling water with a twist of lime. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for the glass. Cale appeared at her elbow. Champagne would be more appropriate for the setting. "I don't drink alcohol around wolves I don't trust," Alara said. She took a sip of her water, then set the glass down and turned to face him. "Which, at present, includes every single person in this room. Even me. Especially you." Cale felt something in his chest shift, a crack forming in the ice he'd built around his heart over centuries of loss. She was smart, careful. She understood that he was dangerous, and she wasn't going to pretend otherwise just because he had money and power. He respected that. "You look beautiful," he said. Color rose in her cheeks. "You already told me that, in your text," which was creepy, by the way, since I was alone in my apartment with the curtains closed. "I didn't see you. I smelled you." At her confused look, he elaborated. "The scent blocker you wear. It's a specific brand. Expensive. I know the chemical composition. When you left your apartment tonight, you weren't wearing it. The suppressants, yes, but not the blocker, which means you listened when I asked you not to. You didn't ask, you commanded. Would you have preferred I ask?" Alara considered this. "No, I think I appreciate the honesty. You're an alpha king. You're used to commanding. Pretending you're not would be dishonest. And you value honesty. I value knowing where I stand." The orchestra shifted into a new song, a waltz, slow and sweet and melancholic. Cale offered his hand. "Dance with me." Alara looked at his hand like it might bite her. "Is this part of the job interview?" Consider it an assessment of how you navigate pack dynamics under pressure. That's a fancy way of saying you want to show everyone I'm under your protection. Cale smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve of his mouth, but he saw her eyes widen slightly. "You're smarter than most of the alphas in this room. Yes, that's exactly what I want. If you dance with me, Corvus will think twice before making a move. Theron will get the message to stay away. And everyone else will understand that you're not prey. What if I don't want to dance? Then I walk away, and you spend the rest of the night fending off wolves who think a lone rogue is fair game." Alara studied him for a long moment. Cale could see her weighing options, calculating risks. This was a woman who'd learned to survive by being careful, by thinking 3 steps ahead. Finally, she placed her hand in his. The electricity was there again. That sharp jolt of connection that made them both inhale sharply. But this time, Cal didn't flinch away. He closed his fingers around hers, feeling how small her hand was in his, how fragile. He could crush her without effort, could break her bones like twigs. Instead, he held her like she was made of glass. Cale led her onto the dance floor. The crowd parted immediately, wolves stepping back to give them space. Everyone was watching now. The entire ballroom had gone quiet except for the orchestra. He placed his hand on her waist. Alara gasped. The heat was immediate and overwhelming. His palm against the silk of her dress, feeling the curve of her waist, the way her body fit against his like 2 puzzle pieces clicking together. His wolf roared in triumph, in recognition, in desperate clawing need. Mine, ours, claim, now. Cale gritted his teeth and forced the beast back down. They began to move. Cale was a good dancer. Centuries of court functions had made sure of that. But Alara was better than he expected. She followed his lead with natural grace, her body responding to his almost before he moved. "You know how to waltz," he observed. "My father taught me." Her voice was soft, distant, like she was remembering. "He said a lady should know how to move with dignity, even when the world was trying to knock her down. Your father sounds like a wise man." He was. Pause. "Until someone killed him." Kale's hand tightened on her waist, just slightly. "Killed?" "They called it an accident, a fall from a cliff. But he walked that path every day for 40 years. He didn't just slip." "Do you know who did it?" Elara looked up at him. Her eyes were dark and deep and full of old pain. "I have suspicions, but no proof. And in pack politics, suspicions without proof are just fantasies." "Tell me the suspicions." "Why?" "Because if someone hurt you, I want to know who." The words came out more intense than Kale intended, more possessive. He saw Elara's breath catch, saw her pupils dilate. She felt it too. The pull, the bond trying to snap into place between them. No, he couldn't let it. Couldn't doom her to 7 days of life followed by a death so painful she'd beg him to end it faster. Kale spun her, pulling her closer, her breasts pressed against his chest. Her face was inches from his. He could count every one of her eyelashes, could see the faint freckle on her left cheekbone, could smell her real scent now, rising through the suppressants, rain and honey and moonlight. His wolf went absolutely feral. "That was him, wasn't it?" Kale said, his voice rough. "The one who rejected you, Theron Greyheart." "Yes. He's a fool. He's an alpha who chose his pack over a mate bond. That's not foolish. That's practical. It's cowardice." Kale's hand slid up her back, feeling the ridge of her spine through silk. A real alpha doesn't bow to political pressure. A real alpha protects what's his, even if the entire world tells him not to. Elara stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. Understanding. Recognition. And then it happened. The bond snapped. Kale felt it like a physical blow, like someone had reached into his chest, wrapped both hands around his heart, and squeezed. The mate bond, that invisible thread that connected souls, materialized between them with the force of a lightning strike. And from the way Elara's eyes went wide, from the way her entire body went rigid in his arms, she felt it too. "Oh God!" she whispered. "Oh no. No, it's you. I know. But you can't be. I already had a mate. The bond was severed. You can't have two true mates. That's not... It's rare," Kale said. His voice was steady, even though his entire world was tilting. "But it happens. When the first bond is rejected before it's consummated, the goddess sometimes offers a second chance. A true mate to replace the false one." Tears gathered in Elara's eyes. "I don't want a second chance. I don't want to do this again. I can't..." "Breathe," Kale commanded softly. "Just breathe. We're in public. Everyone is watching. You need to hold it together for 3 more minutes, and then I'll take you somewhere private, and we can talk. Can you do that?" Elara nodded, but her hands were shaking where they rested on his shoulders. Kyle pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest, letting her hide her face against his neck. To the watching wolves, it would look intimate, romantic. The alpha king claiming his mate in front of witnesses. They wouldn't see her panic. The song was ending. The final notes hung in the air like the last breath before a storm. Kyle kept Elara in his arms, not letting go even as the music stopped. "There's a balcony through those doors," he murmured into her hair. "Private, guarded. We can talk there." "I need to talk," Elara said. Her voice was muffled against his jacket. "I need you to explain why I felt it, and you didn't seem surprised." "Because I felt it this morning. The moment you walked into the conference room, she pulled back to look at him. Tears were tracking down her cheeks now, ruining her careful makeup, but she didn't seem to notice. And you didn't say anything? Because I can't claim you, Elara. The words tasted like ash. I'm cursed. The balcony was accessed through a set of French doors off the main ballroom. It overlooked downtown Seattle, the city spread out below them like a constellation of electric stars. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cold. Kale's guards took up positions at the doors, 6 of them, the best fighters in his territory, loyal to the death. They would make sure no one interrupted. Elara walked to the stone railing and gripped it with both hands. Her knuckles went white. She was still shaking. Explain, she said without turning around. Explain the curse. Kyle moved to stand beside her, not touching, giving her space. 300 years ago, I fell in love with a witch. He told her everything. About Isadora, who'd been kind and brilliant and saw him as a man instead of a monster. About how the pack elders had feared what would happen if an alpha king bonded with a witch, how they'd ordered her family killed. About how Isadora had used the last of her dying strength to curse him. Live forever, Kale said, the words carved into his memory like scars. Watching every love die. Until you find the one with celestial blood who can break you free. He turned to look at Elara. Her profile was perfect against the city lights. I've had 47 mates across 3 centuries. All of them died within 7 days of the claiming bite. I tried everything. Healers, shamans, blood magic. Nothing worked. They died screaming, Elara, begging me to make it stop. And I couldn't save any of them. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're walking into. The bond is there. It's real. I feel it just as much as you do. My wolf is howling for me to claim you, to mark you, to make you mine in every way that matters. His hands clenched into fists. But if I do, you'll die. Painfully, horribly, and I'll have to watch. Elara finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red from crying, her makeup smeared, but she'd never looked more beautiful. Have you tried not claiming the bond? Yes, twice. Once in 1847, once in 1952. Both times, the bond decay killed us both within a month. Slower than the curse, but just as inevitable. So either way, I die. Either way, we both die. Elara laughed. It was a broken, bitter sound. The goddess has a sick sense of humor. I'm sorry. And Kale meant it. If I'd known this morning what you were, I never would have approached you. Never would have put you in this position. But I didn't recognize the bond until you touched me. And by then it was too late. Why didn't you feel it immediately? Like I did? Because I've spent 3 centuries building walls. My wolf is locked so deep inside me that he can barely communicate anymore. It takes time for me to feel what normal wolves feel instantly. Elara processed this. Kale could see her brilliant mind working, cataloging information, looking for solutions where there weren't any. Celestial blood, she said suddenly. You said the curse mentioned celestial blood. Yes, but I don't know what that means. I've searched for 300 years, asked every seer, every elder, every ancient wolf I could find. No one knows what celestial wolves are. It's a myth, a bedtime story. It's not a myth. Kale went very still. What? My father told me our bloodline was celestial, blessed by the moon goddess herself. He said we were bridges between the mortal and the divine. She touched her chest, just over her heart. When I was 8, I saw the moon turn violet, and for just a moment, my eyes glowed the same color. Kale's heart stopped. then started again, beating so hard it hurt. You're celestial? Maybe. I don't know. My father died before he could explain what it meant. When? A week after he told me about the bloodline. Ilara. Kel grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face him fully. What if he was killed because of what you are? What if someone didn't want your bloodline to continue? That's insane. Who would... The arrow hit the stone railing between them with a crack like a gunshot. Kale's instincts took over. He grabbed Ilara and pulled her down, covering her body with his as 3 more arrows whistled through the air where they'd been standing. They shattered against the stone, composite materials designed to pierce Kevlar. Military grade, professional. This wasn't a random attack. This was an assassination. Kale's guards burst through the doors, weapons drawn. More arrows flew from the rooftop across the street. Kyle tracked the trajectory, his enhanced vision picking out the shapes of at least 3 shooters in black tactical gear. Get her inside, one of his guards shouted. But Kyle was already moving. He scooped Ilara up in his arms, feeling her weight, her warmth, the way she instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck. He ran for the doors as more arrows peppered the balcony. One grazed his shoulder. He felt the sting, smelled his own blood, but ignored it. Inside, the ballroom had erupted into chaos. Wolves were shifting, snarling, some running for exits while others ran toward the threat. Alphas shouted orders. Someone screamed. Kale's enforcers were already in pursuit of the shooters, but he knew they wouldn't catch them. Professionals didn't leave trails. He carried Ilara through a service corridor, past staring staff, into a private elevator that required his thumbprint to activate. Hit the button for the penthouse level. The doors closed. The elevator shot upward. Ilara was trembling in his arms. Her face was buried against his neck, and he could feel her heart racing against his chest. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "It's nothing. A graze. You covered me. You could have been killed." "Yes. Why?" Kyle looked down at her, at the woman the universe had chosen for him, the woman he couldn't have without killing. "Because some things," he said quietly, "are worth dying for." The elevator doors opened onto his private penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a space designed for someone who lived alone and expected to die alone. Kel carried Ilara inside and finally, reluctantly, set her on her feet. She looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, still frightened, but underneath the fear was something else. Something that looked almost like trust. "Someone tried to kill me," she said. "Yes." "Someone with military training and expensive equipment." "Yes." "Someone who doesn't want me alive." She took a shaky breath. "You said my father might have been killed because of what I am. What if you're right? What if someone's been hunting celestial wolves? What if I'm the last one?" Kale's jaw clenched. His wolf, already on edge from the mate bond and the attack, snarled with protective fury. "Then they'll have to go through me to finish the job," he growled. "And I've been killing across centuries. I'm very, very good at it." Ilara stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, she started to laugh. It was a half-hysterical sound, tinged with shock and disbelief. "This morning I was worried about client presentations," she said. "Now I'm standing in the penthouse of a cursed Alpha King, being hunted by assassins, and apparently I'm some kind of mythical wolf that everyone thought was extinct." She pressed her hands to her face. "I don't know whether to scream or break something or just pass out." "You could also let me take care of you," Kale offered quietly. "Just for tonight. Let me make sure you're safe. Then tomorrow, in the daylight, We can figure out what to do next. Ilara lowered her hands, looked at him, really looked at him, past the power and the danger to whatever lay underneath. Why would you do that? She asked. I'm your death sentence. You said it yourself. If you claim me, you die. If you don't claim me, you still die. Either way, being near me is going to kill you. Maybe. Kyle reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. The touch was gentle, reverent. But for 3 centuries, I've been existing, not living, just existing, going through the motions, playing the role of alpha king while everything inside me died a little more each decade. He cupped her cheek. She leaned into the touch like a flower leaning toward sunlight. Then you walked into my conference room, he continued, and for the first time in centuries, something inside me stirred back to life. That's not fair, Ilara whispered. Don't make me care about you. Don't make this harder than it already is. I know, I'm sorry. But Kyle didn't move his hand, didn't step away. For what it's worth, I'm trying not to care about you either. Trying to keep my distance. Trying to do the right thing and let you go. How's that working out? Terribly. And then, because Cale had lived lifetimes and was very, very tired of being alone, he leaned down and rested his forehead against hers. Just that. Nothing more. No kiss. No claiming. Just the simple comfort of being close to someone who understood what it meant to be broken and still standing. Stay, he murmured. Just for tonight. Let me keep you safe. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. Ilara closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Outside the penthouse windows, the city glittered like scattered diamonds. And somewhere in the darkness, assassins were reporting back to whoever had hired them. The hunt for the last celestial wolf had begun, but Cale Ashenmore hadn't survived 3 centuries by being easy prey. And he would burn the world to ash before he let anyone take his mate from him, even if he couldn't claim her himself. Ilara woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the scent of cedar and ozone wrapped around her like a blanket. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The gala. The arrows. Cale carrying her to safety. His forehead pressed against hers in the quiet of his penthouse while the city glittered below. She was still wearing the midnight blue dress, though someone had draped a soft cashmere throw over her during the night. She'd fallen asleep on Cale's massive sectional sofa, exhausted from adrenaline crash and emotional overload. Cal sat in an armchair across from her, watching. He'd changed out of his tuxedo into dark jeans and a Henley that clung to his shoulders. His hair was damp from a shower. He held a cup of coffee in his scarred hands. How long have you been watching me sleep? Ilara asked, her voice rough. An hour, maybe 2. No apology in his tone. You talk in your sleep. Did you know that? Ilara's stomach dropped. What did I say? Mostly fragments, names, Thomas, your father, I assume, and... He paused. You kept saying, don't leave me. Over and over. Heat flooded Ilara's cheeks. She sat up, pushing her tangled hair out of her face. I don't remember my dreams. Liar. But Cale's voice was gentle. You remember. You just don't want to tell me. He stood and crossed to the kitchen, which was all marble and stainless steel and looked like it had never been used, poured coffee into a second mug, brought it to her along with cream and sugar on a small tray. I don't know how you take it, he said. Black is fine. Ilara accepted the mug, wrapping both hands around the warmth. The first sip was perfect, strong and dark and exactly what she needed. Thank you. Kyle sat back down, not on the sofa beside her, but in his chair, maintaining distance, It was considerate, but part of Alara hated it. Her wolf wanted him closer, wanted to feel his heat, his presence, his protection. Her wolf was an idiot. "We need to talk about last night," Kale said. "The assassination attempt or the mate bond?" "Both. But let's start with the practical threat. Someone tried to kill you. Professional shooters with military-grade equipment. That takes resources, planning, which means whoever ordered the hit has money and connections." Ilara sipped her coffee and tried to think past the exhaustion. "You think it's connected to my father's death? I think it's connected to what you are. Celestial wolves are supposed to be extinct. If someone's been systematically hunting your bloodline for generations, they're not going to stop just because you're the last one." Kale leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "In fact, being the last one makes you more valuable and more dangerous." "To who?" "That's what I need to find out. I've already put my best investigators on it. They're tracing the arrows, analyzing trajectory, checking security footage from buildings in the area. We'll find out who hired them." "And then what?" Kale's eyes went cold, hard, the eyes of a predator who'd been apex for 3 centuries. "Then I eliminate the threat." "You mean kill them?" "Yes." The simple honesty should have frightened her. Instead, Alara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Safety. For the first time in 5 years, someone was willing to stand between her and danger. Someone powerful enough to actually make a difference. "I should be horrified," she said quietly, "by how much I like that you'd kill for me. But you're not." "No, I'm not." She met his eyes. "Does that make me a bad person?" "It makes you a wolf." Cal smiled slightly. "We're not wired for human morality. We protect our own. We eliminate threats. It's primal, instinctive. I've been pretending to be human for so long, I almost forgot what it felt like to be a wolf, to have a pack. You don't have a pack. You have me." The possessiveness in his voice sent shivers down her spine. "And I have resources that most packs can't dream of. Money, connections, wolves who are loyal to the death. If someone wants to hurt you, they're going to have to go through an army first." Ilara set down her coffee cup. Her hands were shaking again. "Why are you doing this? Last night you said claiming me would kill us both. You said the smart thing would be to walk away." "I did say that. So why haven't you walked away?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and crossed to the windows, looking out at the city waking up below. When he spoke, his voice was so soft she almost didn't hear it. "Because I'm tired, Ilara. I'm so goddamn tired." His shoulders were tense, rigid. Centuries of existing, of watching the world change while I stay the same, of burying mates and pretending I don't care, of being the alpha king, the legend, the monster everyone fears. He turned to look at her, and Ilara saw it then. The cracks in his armor, the exhaustion that went bone deep, the loneliness that came from living too long and loving too much. "You asked me yesterday if I loved all 47, he continued. "The answer is complicated. Some of them I barely knew. I claimed them out of desperation, hoping maybe this time the curse would break. Those deaths were quick, impersonal. I mourned them, but I didn't shatter." He moved back toward the sofa, but didn't sit. Just stood there, his presence alone filling the space, vulnerability written in every line of his body. "But some of them I did love, deeply, completely. I learned their favorite songs. I memorized the way they laughed. I promised them forever." His voice cracked. "And then I watched them die screaming, watched the curse eat them from the inside out while they begged me to make it stop. And I couldn't. I couldn't save any of them. A tear tracked down Cale's cheek. He didn't bother wiping it away. The last one was in 1952. Her name was Catherine. She was a nurse, kind, brilliant. She knew about the curse and chose me anyway. Said love was worth dying for. He laughed bitterly. She lasted 6 days. On the 7th day, she started bleeding from her eyes. Her screams could be heard 3 blocks away. I held her while she died. And when it was over, I swore I'd never do it again. Cale, Ilara whispered. She stood up, the throw falling away, crossed to him, reached up and touched his face, her small hand against his rough cheek. I'm so sorry. I don't want your pity. It's not pity. It's grief. For what you've lost. For what was taken from you. She brushed away his tear with her thumb. You've carried this alone for so long. Something broke in Cale's expression. The control he'd been maintaining. The wall he'd built around his heart. It cracked. Crumbled. He pulled her against his chest and buried his face in her hair. And Ilara held him while he shook, while 3 centuries of pain came pouring out in silent, shuddering breaths. She wrapped her arms around him and held as tightly as she could, even though her arms barely reached around his broad back. You're not alone anymore, she whispered against his chest. I'm here, I see you, and I'm not going anywhere. You'll die if you stay. Then we'll find a way to break the curse. Together. Cale pulled back just enough to look down at her. His eyes were red, wet. But there was something else there now. Something that looked almost like hope. You barely know me, he said roughly. Why would you fight for me? Because someone should have fought for you 300 years ago. And they didn't. So I will. Ilara. Her name was a prayer on his lips, a plea, a warning. And then he kissed her. It wasn't the claiming kiss, wasn't the consuming passion that would forge the mate bond. It was softer than that, gentler. His lips brushed hers like a question, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Instead, Ilara rose on her toes, fisted her hands in his shirt, and kissed him back. It was sweet, devastating, a promise wrapped in vulnerability. Cale's hands came up to cup her face, holding her like she was something precious, something he was afraid to break. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. We can't do this, Cale said, but his forehead was pressed against hers. His hands were still cradling her face. If we bond, you die. I know. 7 days, Ilara. That's all we'd have. I know. Then why are you still here? Ilara smiled, sad, determined. Because maybe 7 days of real love is better than 70 years of emptiness. Because maybe we find a way to break the curse. Or maybe... She swallowed hard. Maybe we don't. But at least we'll have tried. Cale closed his eyes. You're going to destroy me. You're already destroyed. We both are. She pulled back to look at him. The question is whether we destroy ourselves further by walking away, or whether we fight for something better. I've been fighting for 300 years. Then let me fight with you. Before Cale could respond, the elevator chimed. His entire body went rigid, predatory instincts taking over. He moved between Ilara and the doors in a blur of speed. 3 elderly wolves stepped out of the elevator. They wore formal robes in gray and silver and black. Their faces were sharp, calculating. They moved with the careful dignity of wolves who'd lived long enough to watch empires rise and fall. The Council. Elder Voss entered first. He was the oldest, his white hair braided down his back, his face a map of wrinkles. But his eyes were sharp, alert. He'd seen centuries pass and forgotten more pack politics than most alphas would ever learn. Behind him came Elder Corvus, the man who'd whispered in Theron's ear, who'd watched Ilara's father die with satisfaction. He looked at her now with undisguised calculation. The third elder was a woman, Magistrate Kyle. She was younger than the other two, maybe only a century old, with iron-gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd been beautiful once and chose severity instead. "Alpha King," Voss said. His voice was dry as old leaves. "We need to speak with you. And with her." Kyle didn't move from his protective stance. "She has a name. Use it." "Very well. We need to speak with Miss Hayes." Voss's gaze shifted to Ilara, about the incident last night, and about her future. "My future is none of your concern," Ilara said. She moved to stand beside Kale, not behind him, presenting a united front. Corvus's lip curled. "Your future became our concern the moment the Alpha King claimed you as his guest. When a rogue with unknown bloodlines appears at a summit and nearly starts a war, the Council takes notice. I didn't start anything. Someone tried to kill me." "And we've launched an investigation," Magistrate Kale said. Her voice was crisp, professional. "But that's not why we're here. We're here because of ancient law, and because the stability of the kingdom depends on it." She turned to Kale. "You've declared this woman under your protection. By pack law, that's a precursor to claiming her as your mate, which would make her Luna Queen of the Western Territories." "I haven't claimed her," Kale said flatly. "But you intend to." It wasn't a question. "We can smell it, the bond forming between you. It's already half complete." Kale said nothing. His jaw was tight. Voss sighed. "Alpha King, we mean no disrespect, but you must understand our position. The last time you took a mate, it was catastrophic. Not just for you, but for the kingdom. You disappeared for 2 decades. The territories nearly fell into civil war. We cannot allow that to happen again. That was 70 years ago, and memories are long among our kind." Voss stepped forward. "Miss Hayes, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. What do you know about your bloodline?" Ilara hesitated. Kale's hand found hers, squeezed. A silent message. "Tell them." "My father told me we're celestial," she said. "Blessed by the moon goddess, bridges between the mortal and divine." Corvus's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Celestial bloodlines were eradicated centuries ago. They were too dangerous, too powerful. The goddess herself mandated their destruction after the Eclipse Wars. Or that's what you were told," Magistrate Kale said quietly. She was looking at Ilara with something that might have been respect. "Tell me, child, have you ever seen your eyes glow? Have you ever felt the pull of the moon stronger than other wolves?" "Once, when I was 8, but it only lasted a moment. And your father died shortly after." It wasn't a question. Ilara nodded slowly. "Then someone knew what you were," the magistrate said, "and they tried to end your bloodline before you came of age and manifested your full abilities." "This is exactly why she cannot be Luna," Corvus snapped. "She's a target, a liability. Her very existence threatens the stability of the kingdom. If other packs learn that the Alpha King has bonded with a celestial wolf, they'll see it as a power grab. Civil war will be inevitable." "Unless she proves she's worthy," Voss said. The room went silent. Ilara felt Kale's grip on her hand tighten to the point of pain. "No. I'm afraid it's not your decision, Alpha King." Voss's voice was gentle but implacable. "Ancient law is clear. When an Alpha King wishes to mate outside the approved bloodlines, The prospective Luna must undergo the trial of worth. 3 days in the wilderness, hunted by the council's enforcers. If she survives to reach the sacred ground at dawn on the 4th day, she's deemed worthy. If she doesn't, she dies, Kel finished. His voice was cold, lethal. And you're asking me to let my mate be hunted like prey, to watch her fight for her life while I stand by, helpless. We're asking you to follow the law. Magistrate Kale's voice was firm. If you refuse, your claim to the throne becomes forfeit. The council will name a new Alpha King, and without your protection, Miss Hayes becomes fair game for any wolf who sees her as a threat. Is that what you want? This is insane, Elara said. Her heart was racing, but her voice was steady. You're talking about hunting a rogue wolf through the forest for 3 days. That's not a trial. That's a death sentence. On the contrary, Voss said, it's an opportunity. If you survive, you'll be recognized as Luna Queen with all the rights and protections that entails. Your bloodline will be legitimized, and anyone who moves against you will face the combined wrath of the kingdom. And if I don't survive, then the problem solves itself. The brutal honesty of it stole Elara's breath. They wanted her to fail, wanted her to die in the woods so Kale would be free to choose a more appropriate mate. Someone malleable, political, safe. When? Kale's voice was a growl. The silver bled to pure silver in his irises, the wolf rising to the surface. When does this trial take place? 4 days from now, Voss said. At dawn on Saturday. The trial grounds are in the Ironwood Forest, neutral territory under council protection. She'll be given basic supplies and a 12-hour head start. Then the enforcers will begin the hunt. No weapons? No modern weapons. Knives are permitted, nothing else. This is barbaric. This is tradition. Corvus smiled. It was not a kind smile. And tradition is what holds the packs together. Without it, we're nothing but animals. Elara looked at Kale, saw the war raging behind his eyes, the Alpha King who wanted to refuse, to protect her, to burn the world down rather than let her be endangered, and the man who knew that refusing would doom them both. She made the decision for him. I accept, Elara said clearly. Elara, no. Kale turned to her. You don't know what you're saying. The Ironwood Forest is 300 square miles of raw wilderness, bears, cougars, rogues who've gone feral, and that's before the enforcers start hunting you. I know. She squeezed his hand. But if I don't do this, you lose your throne. Civil war breaks out. And whoever's been hunting my bloodline will have open season on me. This way, at least I have a chance. A chance to die. A chance to prove I'm not prey. She turned to the council. I have conditions. I want 4 days to prepare. I want access to the trial grounds beforehand so I can study the terrain. And I want it in writing that if I succeed, my status as Luna Queen is uncontested. Voss actually smiled. You negotiate like a queen already. Agreed. All 3 conditions are acceptable. There's one more thing, Elara said. If I die during the trial, I want it investigated. Thoroughly. Because if someone's trying to eliminate celestial wolves, they're not going to let this opportunity pass. Also agreed. Voss bowed slightly. The trial begins Saturday at dawn. 4 days. Use them wisely, Miss Hayes. Very few rogues survive the trial of worth. I'm not like other rogues. No, Magistrate Kale said quietly. You're not, which is precisely why you might actually have a chance. The council left as silently as they'd arrived. The elevator doors closed, and Elara was alone with Kale again. He was shaking. Actually shaking. His hands were clenched into fists, his breathing harsh. I can't watch you die, he said. I've watched 47 women I cared about die. I can't do it again. I can't. Elara moved in front of him, took his face in both hands, and forced him to look at her. Then don't watch me die. Watch me live. Watch me fight. Watch me prove that I'm strong enough to stand beside you. You shouldn't have to prove anything, but I do. Not because I'm a rogue, not because I'm celestial, but because I'm choosing you. And that choice comes with a price. She pulled his head down until their foreheads touched. So teach me. For the next 4 days, teach me everything you know about survival, about fighting, about being a wolf instead of pretending to be human. 4 days isn't enough time. It's what we have. Cale closed his eyes, breathed in her scent. When he opened them again, the despair had been replaced by grim determination. Then we don't waste a second, he said. The next 4 days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, adrenaline, and moments of connection so intense they stole Elara's breath. Cale moved them to a private estate an hour outside Seattle. It was isolated, surrounded by forest, with a training facility that looked more military than civilian. Workout equipment, weapons, a sparring ring. I built this place after Catherine died, Cale said as he showed her around. I thought if I trained hard enough, pushed myself far enough, I could outrun the grief. It didn't work, but the facility remains. He was all business now. The vulnerable man who'd broken down in her arms was gone, replaced by the Alpha King, the warrior who'd survived 3 centuries of war. We focus on 3 things, he told her: speed, strategy, and survival instinct. You can't outfight trained enforcers. They're bigger, stronger, more experienced, but you can outthink them, and you can outrun them if you're smart about it. Day 1 was brutal. Cale ran her through conditioning exercises that left her gasping and trembling, sprints through the forest, climbing, swimming in the freezing river. He pushed her past the point where her muscles screamed for mercy, past the point where she wanted to collapse. The enforcers won't give you breaks, he said. They'll push you to exhaustion, then attack when you're weak. You need to be able to function when your body is failing. Elara wanted to hate him for it, but she understood. This was how he showed love, by making sure she had every possible advantage. That night, she collapsed on the sofa in the estate's living room. Every muscle ached. Her feet were blistered. Her lungs burned. Cale knelt in front of her with a first aid kit, cleaned her cuts, bandaged her blisters. His touch was gentle despite his massive hands. You did well today, he said quietly. I feel like I'm dying. That means you're getting stronger. He looked up at her, then, without warning, settled on the sofa beside her. Not touching, but close. I'm sorry I have to push you so hard. Don't apologize. I need this. She reached out and touched his hair. It was damp with sweat from his own training. Cale? Yeah? Thank you for caring enough to prepare me, for not treating me like I'm fragile. His hand found hers, squeezed. You survived rejection, built a life from nothing, walked into a ballroom full of predators with your head held high. That's not fragile. That's forged steel. Elara leaned her head on his shoulder, just for a moment, just long enough to breathe in his scent and feel safe. Stay? Just until I fall asleep? Cale's arm came around her. As long as you need. He was still there when dawn broke, watching over her, keeping the nightmares at bay. Day 2 was worse. Cale taught her to fight, not with honor or rules, but with desperation. He showed her where to strike to disable an opponent. Eyes, throat, groin, knees. You're small, he said. That's an advantage. You're faster, more agile. Get in close, do damage, get out. Never stay in a prolonged fight. They sparred for hours. Kale held back enough not to seriously hurt her, but not so much that she didn't feel every mistake. Every time she left herself open, he exploited it. Every time she telegraphed her moves, he countered. Again, he said, after throwing her to the mat for the 20th time. I can't, Elara gasped. Yes, you can. Get up. Kyle, I can't even feel my arms. Then use your legs. Use your teeth. Use whatever you have. He crouched beside her. In the forest, when you're exhausted and hurt and bleeding, you don't get to quit. You fight or you die. Which do you choose? Elara glared at him. Then she swept his legs out from under him. Kale went down hard, surprise flashing across his face. Before he could recover, Elara was on him. She'd never win a contest of strength, so she went for speed instead. Fingers jabbing toward his eyes, pulling back at the last second. If it had been real, she would have blinded him. Kale caught her wrists, flipped them over so he was pinning her to the mat. They were both breathing hard. Sweat made their skin slick where they touched. Good, he said. His voice was rough. That was good. They were inches apart. Elara could count his eyelashes, could see the silver threading through his irises, could feel the hard planes of his body pressed against her softer curves. The awareness hit them both at the same time. Kale's pupils dilated, his grip on her wrists loosened, becoming something closer to a caress. Elara, he said, warning, plea. She arched up and kissed him. This kiss was different from the gentle one 2 days ago. This one was desperate, hungry, born from adrenaline and exhaustion and the constant awareness that they were running out of time. Kale made a sound low in his throat. His hands released her wrists and slid into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss. His tongue swept into her mouth, claiming, possessing. Elara wrapped her legs around his waist and held on. Let herself feel, let herself want. They broke apart, gasping. We can't, Kale said, but he didn't move away. Didn't put distance between them. If we complete the bond before the trial. I know. Elara's lips were swollen, tender. I know, but Kale, what if I don't survive? What if Saturday is the last time we see each other? Don't you want to have something, some memory that's just ours? I want everything with you. His voice broke. I want decades, centuries. I want to watch you build buildings that last longer than empires. I want to hear you laugh. I want to know what you look like when you wake up on a lazy Sunday morning. I want it all. But we might not get it. No, we might not. Elara cupped his face. Then kiss me again. Give me something to fight for. Something to come back to. Kyle kissed her, slow and deep and devastating. He kissed her like she was his entire world, like she was the answer he'd stopped believing existed. But before it could go further, before they could cross the line into irreversible, he pulled away, stood up, offered her his hand. Not yet, he said. His voice was ragged. Not until you pass the trial and we know you'll survive. I won't claim you just to watch you die. That's not fair. I know. But it's all I can give you right now. Hope and preparation. He pulled her to her feet. Come on, we're not done yet. The next 2 days followed the same pattern. Brutal training, moments of connection, stolen kisses that never went far enough. Kale teaching her to navigate by the stars, to find water, to move silently through underbrush. On Thursday night, their last night before the trial, Elara woke screaming. The nightmare was vivid, violent. She was running through dark woods, pursued by things with too many teeth. Her father's voice calling her name, blood on her hands. The feeling of dying slowly while someone laughed. Strong arms wrapped around her. Kyle pulled her against his chest, murmuring soft sounds that weren't quite words. Just comfort. Just presence. "I've got you," he said into her hair. "You're safe. I'm here." Ilara clung to him. "I'm scared. I don't want to admit it. But I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's overconfidence that gets you killed. What if I'm not strong enough?" "You are." Kyle pulled back just enough to look at her. They were in her bedroom, moonlight streaming through the windows. "Look at what you've already overcome. Rejection. Bond sickness. 5 years building yourself from nothing. This trial, it's just one more obstacle to conquer. Will you be there? At the trial? I can't enter the grounds, council rules, but I'll be at the boundary, waiting, and the moment you cross that finish line, I'll be there to catch you." Ilara touched his face. "Promise me something? Anything. If I don't make it, if something goes wrong and I don't survive, promise me you won't give up. Promise me you'll keep fighting, keep living, find a way to break the curse and be happy. Ilara, promise me, Kale." He was silent for a long moment. Then he kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her cheeks, finally, her lips, soft, reverent. "I promise," he whispered against her mouth. "But you're going to survive. You're going to pass this trial and become my Luna Queen. And then we're going to fight like hell to break this curse together. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." He lay down beside her, over the blankets, fully clothed, but present. "Now sleep. You need your strength." Ilara curled against him, let his warmth and his scent and his steady heartbeat lull her back toward sleep. Just before she drifted off, she heard him whisper, "You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, you're not alone." Friday afternoon, Ilara drove to the construction site for Kale's estate. She'd spent the morning finalizing plans, triple-checking measurements. Work was the only thing that made her feel normal, the only thing that reminded her she was more than just a wolf about to fight for her life. Kale had offered to come with her. She'd refused, needed space to think, to prepare mentally for what was coming. She was reviewing the foundation specs when a voice called her name. "Ilara?" She turned and froze. Isolde Sylvain stood at the edge of the construction site, looking nothing like the polished Luna who'd clung to Theron at the gala. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was tangled. There was a bruise on her left cheekbone, poorly covered with makeup. "Isolde." Ilara's hand went instinctively to the knife Kale had insisted she carry. "What are you doing here?" "Please." Isolde's voice broke. "Please. I need to talk to you. It's important. It's about Theron, about the trial." Every instinct Ilara had screamed danger, but Isolde looked genuinely terrified, desperate. And part of Ilara, the part that still remembered what it felt like to be trapped, couldn't walk away. "You have 2 minutes, Ilara said. She didn't put the knife away. Isolde stumbled closer. "Theron's planning something. I don't know all the details, but I overheard him talking to some of his betas. They're going to sabotage your trial. They're going to make sure you don't survive." "Why would Theron do that?" "Because he's obsessed." Tears spilled down Isolde's cheeks. "He never got over you. Every time he looks at me, I can see it. I'm not you. I'll never be you. And now that you're with the Alpha King, it's destroying him. He can't stand that you moved on, that you're happy. So he's going to kill me? I think so. Or have someone else do it." Isolde pulled an envelope from her pocket, held it out with shaking hands. "I have passports, money, enough for you to disappear, to start over somewhere the Pax can't reach. Please, Ilara, run. Don't go to the trial. It's a trap." Ilara stared at the envelope, at Isolde's desperate face, at the bruise that suggested Theron had hit her. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "Because I know what it's like to be a pawn in someone else's game." Isolde's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Because I'm sorry. For everything. For taking what should have been yours. For standing by while Theron destroyed you. I was young and stupid, and I thought status mattered more than conscience. But I was wrong." She pushed the envelope into Ilara's hand. "Please, just go. Before it's too late." Ilara looked at the envelope, then at Isolde's face, and she saw it. The flicker. The calculation behind the tears. This was a performance. "You're lying," Ilara said flatly. Isolde's expression changed. The desperation vanished, replaced by cold fury. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." Movement at the tree line. 6 large wolves emerged, surrounding them, and behind them, walking with casual confidence, came Theron Greyheart. He looked different than he had at the gala. More dangerous. His eyes were wild, desperate. The look of a man who'd lost everything and decided to burn the world down. "Hello, Ilara," he said. "I'm sorry it had to be this way." Ilara's hand tightened on her knife, but she was surrounded. 6 against 1. Even with Kale's training, she wouldn't win this fight. "Why?" she asked. "Buying time. Looking for an opening?" "Because I made a mistake 5 years ago." Theron moved closer. "I let the council convince me you weren't good enough, that I needed a political match, a Luna with status and connections. But they were wrong. You were always the one. You were always meant to be mine. I'm not a possession, Theron. No, you're a queen. My queen. And I'm going to fix what I broke." He gestured to his wolves. "Take her." They lunged. Ilara fought. She used everything Kale had taught her. Speed over strength. Dirty fighting. Desperation. She managed to cut one wolf across the face before they tackled her. Chemical nets wrapped around her. Suppressants burning through her skin. The world tilted. Spun. The last thing Ilara saw before darkness claimed her was Isolde, standing with her arms wrapped around herself, crying. "I'm sorry," Isolde whispered. "He has my sister. I didn't have a choice." Then nothing. Kel felt it the moment the Bond started screaming. He was in his office, reviewing security footage from the assassination attempt, when pain exploded through his chest, the kind of pain that meant his mate was in danger. The glass of whiskey in his hand shattered. He was moving before the shards hit the floor. His wolf surged forward, taking partial control, claws extended, eyes went silver. He vaulted over his desk and hit the door, running. His enforcers scattered as he burst into the hallway. "Find her," he snarled. "Find Ilara. Now." They moved instantly. Calls went out. Tracking teams mobilized. Within 3 minutes, they'd located her car at the construction site. Kale shifted and ran. His wolf form defied nature, larger than any creature should be, black as midnight with eyes that glowed like silver stars. He covered the 40 miles in less than 20 minutes, pushing his body to speeds that would have killed a lesser wolf. He arrived at the construction site to find Ilara's car empty, her purse on the ground, signs of a struggle in the mud, and Isolde Sylvain sitting on a concrete block, sobbing. Kale shifted back to human form, walked toward her with murder in his eyes. Isolde looked up, saw him, flinched. "Where is she?" His voice was barely human, more growl than words. "Theron took her." The words tumbled out in a rush. "He's taking her to the trial grounds. He's going to start the hunt early, tonight, 36 hours before the official trial. If she dies, he'll claim it was the forest. An accident. No one can prove otherwise. Why are you telling me this?" "Because he has my sister. I had to help him or he'd kill her. But I can't. Isolde's voice broke. I can't watch him do this. I thought I could, but I can't. She doesn't deserve this. Neither does my sister. We're all just pieces in his game. Cale grabbed Isolde by the shoulders, lifted her off the ground. Where in the trial grounds, exactly? The old hunting cabin, 2 miles north of the boundary. That's where he's taking her first. After that, I don't know. Kyle dropped her, turned to his head enforcer. Get a team. Full tactical gear. We move in 5 minutes. Your Majesty, the enforcer said carefully. If we enter the trial grounds before the officials start, it violates council law. They could use it to strip you of your title. I don't care about titles. Cale's eyes blazed. I care about her. If following the law means watching my mate die, then the law can burn. He shifted again, threw his head back, and howled. The sound shattered windows for 3 blocks. It echoed off the mountains. It carried on the wind like a promise of violence. 47 mates had died in his arms. The 48th would not. Cale ran toward the forest. Behind him, his wolves followed. An army in the darkness. A force of nature that would tear through anything standing between him and Alara. The hunt had begun, and God help anyone who stood in his way. Alara woke to the smell of mildew and rotting wood. Her head pounded. Her mouth tasted like chemicals. The suppressants they'd used on her burned through her system, making her wolf feel distant and sluggish. She tried to move and couldn't. Her hands were bound behind her back, tied to something heavy and immovable. She forced her eyes open. The hunting cabin was old, ancient, really. The logs that formed the walls were dark with age and moisture, gaps between them letting in cold night air. A single lantern hung from a beam, casting weak yellow light. The floor was warped, sagging in places where the joists had rotted. And Theron sat in a wooden chair 10 feet away, watching her. He looked haggard. His clothes were rumpled, his hair unkempt. There was a manic energy in his eyes that made Alara's stomach turn. This wasn't the calculating alpha from the gala. This was a man who'd crossed a line and couldn't find his way back. You're awake, he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. Good. I was worried I'd used too much sedative. Alara tested her bonds. Her hands were tied to an iron stovepipe, the metal cold against her wrists. The knots were tight. Professional. Theron, her voice came out raspy. What are you doing? What I should have done 5 years ago. He stood and moved closer, knelt in front of her so they were eye level. I'm fixing my mistake. I'm making you mine. I'm not yours to claim. I never was. You felt the bond. I know you did. That night at the mating moon, before I rejected it. You felt it snap into place. His hand reached out, fingers trembling as they hovered near her face. We were meant to be together, Alara. The goddess chose us. And I threw it away, because Elder Corvus convinced me that power mattered more than love. So this is about regret. This is about making things right. Theron's eyes were wet, desperate. The council forced me to choose Isolde. Said a rogue with no status would weaken the bloodline. I was young, stupid. I believed them. But I've spent 5 years drowning in what I lost. 5 years watching Isolde and knowing she's not you. Knowing she'll never be you. That's not my problem, Theron. You made your choice. A choice I'm going to unmake. He stood abruptly, started pacing. If I claim you before the trial, before the Alpha King can complete his bond, you'll be mine again. The earlier bond takes precedence. Pack law is clear on that. Except you rejected the bond. It's severed. Dead. Not fully. I felt you at the gala. Felt the echo of what we had. It's faint, but it's there. which means if I claim you now, the bond can be reforged. He stopped pacing, looked at her with frightening intensity. We'll run. South America. Asia. Somewhere the packs can't reach. We'll start a new pack. Just us. The way it should have been. I don't love you, Theron. The words landed like physical blows. She watched him flinch, watched something break behind his eyes. You could learn to love me again if you just gave me a chance. If you let me show you that I've changed. You haven't changed. You're still the man who chose status over his mate. You're still the man who let Elder Corvus whisper poison in your ear, and now you're the man who kidnapped me because you can't accept that I moved on. Ilara met his gaze, held it. I survived your rejection. I built a life, found someone who sees me as an equal, not a possession. I'm not going back to being the orphan girl who waited for scraps of your attention. Stop it. Theron's voice cracked. Stop talking about him. Stop pretending he's better than me. He is better, in every way that matters. Theron roared. The sound was half human, half wolf. He shifted partially, his face elongating, teeth extending. When he looked at Ilara again, his eyes were wolf amber and completely unhinged. Then I'll make you forget him, he snarled. I'll claim you so deeply that his scent will never cover mine. And when he finds you, you'll already be marked. Already be mine. He lunged forward. And Ilara's architect brain, the part that had been analyzing the cabin since she woke, made its calculations. The floor, warped and sagging, water damage from decades of roof leaks, the joists beneath compromised, the iron stove she was tied to, heavy and old, sitting directly over the weakest point. Theron, she said. Her voice was calm, cold. You're standing on dry rot. He paused. Confusion flickered across his face. What? Ilara slammed both heels down with all her strength, not on the floor itself, on the base of the iron stove. The impact, combined with the stove's weight and her sudden movement, was the final insult to joists that had been dying for years. With a crack like a gunshot, the floor gave way. The stove plunged through, dragging Ilara down with it into the crawl space below. She hit hard. The wind knocked from her lungs, but the rusted pipe she was tied to snapped on impact. Her hands were still bound, but she was free from the anchor. Above her, Theron stumbled backward. His wolf reflexes saved him from following her through the hole, but he hit the stone hearth behind him. Hard. His head cracked against rock. He went down, dazed, bleeding. Ilara didn't wait. She scrambled through the debris, yanked her bound hands against a sharp piece of broken metal until the rope frayed, pulled. The binding snapped. She was up, through the hole in the floor, out the cabin door into cold night air. The forest was dark, dense. She could hear water running somewhere to her left. River. Water would mask her scent. Behind her, Theron roared, not dazed anymore. Furious. Ilara ran. 4 wolves burst from the cabin. She heard them shift, heard the thud of paws hitting earth. They'd catch her in seconds if she stayed in the open. Ilara veered toward the sound of water. Her architect brain was still working, still calculating. The ironwood forest. She'd studied maps, memorized terrain. 2 miles north of the official trial boundary meant she was near Raven Creek. Fast-moving water, rocky banks, natural cover. She hit the creek at full sprint and didn't slow. Plunged into water so cold it felt like knives. The current tried to sweep her downstream, but she fought it. Crossed to the far bank, pulled herself up using exposed roots. Behind her, the wolves reached the creek. She heard them splashing, heard Theron's voice, still half-shifted, shouting orders. Split up. She can't have gone far. Find her scent. Ilara moved along the bank, staying in the shallows where water would hide her tracks. Her body was screaming, cold, exhausted. The suppressant still made her wolf feel distant, sluggish, but she'd survived worse. Bond sickness, 5 years alone, Theron's rejection. She would survive this too. A fallen log blocked her path. She climbed over it, dropping into deeper forest on the other side, used her knowledge of structure and weight distribution to find the paths that wouldn't leave obvious tracks, stayed off soft earth, moved over rocks and roots. Behind her, the wolves were getting closer. They were faster, stronger, but she was smarter. Ilara found a game trail and followed it for 50 yards, then doubled back along a different path, created false trails, used every trick Kale had taught her. Think like prey that refuses to be caught. Use the environment. Make them work for every inch. A wolf howled, close, too close. Ilara's breath was coming in ragged gasps. Her legs burned. The cold was seeping into her bones, making her movements sluggish. She burst into a clearing and stopped. Dead end. A cliff face rose 30 feet in front of her. To her left and right, thick underbrush. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Trapped. 4 wolves emerged from the trees. They shifted back to human form. Theron's betas, naked and dangerous, eyes glowing amber in the moonlight. And then Theron himself stepped into the clearing, still half-shifted, more monster than man. Blood from his head wound streaked down his face. "Clever," he said. His voice was distorted by his elongated jaw. "Using the river, doubling back, you've learned some tricks." "Let me go, Theron. This isn't you. You're not a monster." "Yes, I am." He moved closer. Slow. Predatory. "I've been a monster since the night I rejected you." "I just pretended otherwise. But I'm done pretending. Done following rules made by old wolves who've forgotten what it means to want something so badly it burns." Ilara's back hit the cliff face. Nowhere left to run. Theron was 10 feet away. Then 5. "I'll make it quick," he said. The claiming bite. "Then we run before the Alpha King realizes what happened. You'll hate me at first, but eventually you'll understand. Eventually you'll forgive me." He shifted fully. A massive gray wolf with Theron's eyes, crouched, prepared to spring. Ilara grabbed a piece of broken branch from the ground. It wasn't much, barely a weapon, but it was something. "Come on then," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Let's finish this." Theron lunged. A shadow hit him from the side like a meteor. The impact sent both wolves tumbling across the clearing. When they separated, a massive black wolf stood between Ilara and Theron. Larger than any wolf should be, eyes blazing with primal fury like polished mercury in the moonlight. Kyle. He didn't wait for Theron to recover, just attacked with the kind of brutal efficiency that came from 3 centuries of killing. Teeth found Theron's shoulder, shook him like a rag doll, threw him across the clearing into a tree. Theron hit with a crack that suggested broken ribs. He shifted back to human, gasping. Blood poured from his wounds. The 4 betas tried to help their alpha. Kyle turned on them with a snarl that made them freeze in their tracks. His message was clear. Try it and die. They backed away, hands up. Submission. Kyle shifted back to human form. His body was corded muscle and barely contained violence. He moved to Ilara, checked her for injuries with hands that trembled. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, raw with emotion. "I'm okay. Cold. Tired. But okay." Kyle pulled her against his chest. She felt him shaking, felt the desperate way he held her, like he'd been drowning and she was air. "When I felt the bond scream," he whispered into her hair. "When I knew you were in danger and I couldn't reach you. I've never been that terrified in all my years." I'm here. I'm safe. Because you're brilliant and fierce and you escaped on your own. He pulled back to look at her. The floor. You collapsed the floor using your weight and the stove as leverage. Architect brain. She managed a weak smile. Structural failure can be useful. The sound of helicopters cut through the night. Floodlight swept the clearing. Wolves in council tactical gear rappelled down from the darkness, weapons drawn. Elder Voss stepped into the light. Behind him came Magistrate Kale and a dozen enforcers. Voss took in the scene. Ilara bruised and shaking. Kale standing protectively over her. Theron broken and bleeding on the ground. The 4 betas in submission. Well, Voss said. His voice was dry. This is irregular. Elder Corvus pushed through the crowd of enforcers. His face was twisted with satisfaction. Alpha King, you violated council law. The trial grounds are sacred. By entering before the official start time, you forfeited your right to claim the throne. I don't care about the throne, Kale growled. Someone kidnapped my mate. I responded. She's not your mate. You haven't claimed her. Corvus smiled, sharp, cruel. And now you never will. The council will appoint a new Alpha King, someone who respects tradition, someone who understands that rogues with delusions of grandeur have no place beside true power. Enough, Corvus. Magistrate Kale stepped forward. She looked at Ilara with something that might have been respect. The trial's purpose is to test a prospective Luna's ability to survive under extreme duress, to prove she has the strength, intelligence, and will to stand beside an Alpha King. She turned to address the gathered wolves. Miss Hayes was kidnapped by a rival Alpha, bound, held in a hostile location. She escaped using her wits, evaded pursuit through difficult terrain, stood her ground when cornered. The magistrate's voice rang with authority. If that doesn't prove her worth, then the trial itself is meaningless. She didn't complete the official course, Corvus protested, because she was busy surviving an actual threat instead of a simulated one. Elder Voss moved to stand beside the magistrate. I've presided over 43 trials in my lifetime. Most candidates face forest dangers and council enforcers who know not to cause permanent harm. Miss Hayes faced wolves who wanted her dead or claimed against her will. I'd say that qualifies. He looked at the other enforcers. All in favor of recognizing Miss Hayes as having passed the trial of worth? Hands went up. Not all, but enough. More than 2/3. Voss nodded. The council recognizes Ilara Hayes as qualified to stand as Luna Queen, should the Alpha King choose to claim her. Corvus's face went purple with rage. This is a farce. You're changing centuries of tradition for a rogue who seduced the king with celestial bloodline tricks. She's dangerous, a threat to pack stability. The only threat here, Kale said softly, is you. He turned to his head enforcer. Investigate Elder Corvus. I want to know who hired those shooters at the gala. I want to know who's been hunting celestial wolves. And I want to know what Corvus knew about Theron's plans tonight. Corvus paled. You have no authority to investigate a council elder. I do when that elder is suspected of conspiracy to murder. Kale's smile was cold. And attempted regicide, because attacking my mate is attacking me. 2 enforcers moved to flank Corvus. The old wolf tried to run. They caught him easily. As they dragged him away, he screamed, "You're making a mistake. The celestial bloodlines were eliminated for a reason. She'll destroy everything. You'll see. You'll all see." Silence fell over the clearing after he was gone. Ilara moved toward where Theron lay. He'd shifted fully back to human, naked and shivering. His betas had covered him with a jacket. He looked broken. Not just physically, spiritually. She knelt beside him. Kyle made a sound of protest, but she held up a hand. Theron, she said quietly. He looked at her. Tears tracked through the blood on his face. I'm sorry. God, Alara, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I couldn't let you go. Couldn't accept that I'd lost you forever. You're sick, Alara said. Not cruelly, stating fact. What you feel isn't love, it's obsession. You need help, Theron. Real help. Therapy. Time away from pack politics and council pressure. I destroyed everything. My pack will never respect